to just console log the args, and we're going to process, even with node, okay? With node, you have a global called process, which is basically the process that's running. If you're doing command line apps, even with node, you want to make sure that you have process.exit and then some exit code, success or fail, 0 or 1, or non-zero. We're going to exit with 0. So I'm going to go cd into node. I'm going to say, I'm just going to run index. It tells me I'm missing the required argument name. Okay, I got to have, okay, sweet. So here are our arguments. This is an object, okay? The underscore value is going to be the raw, raw unit array, or no, the commands. It's me I think the commands. Then on the object, you're going to have all of your options. So you're going to have the short and the long versions, okay? So it makes sense in your code to just use options.n. Then maybe it's a really small app and you don't really care if it's like super readable, right? On a bigger app, I would recommend using the full options.name or args.name, that's how I named it. Now, you have $0. $0 here is what we've told yards our script name is. So even though I'm calling index.js, and in the real world, like if this were bash, $0 would just be index.sh if it were an sh file. I've told yards, hey, this is what we've named the thing, so it's actually just giving me that as $0. All right, so if we do something like n equals chicken, foo, bar, dash foo, bar, we can then see that we got another thing on our object output of foo and bar, even though it's not even something that we define. So I don't know why you'd want to, but you could have a command line that allows secret parameters. You know, I mean, maybe non-published parameters. Actually, I do know why you'd want to. You have a super admin set of functionality that, like, you just have to know the thing to pass in. And it's not something I would necessarily publish, but if it's like an internal team tool, and it's like, oh, Jimmy and Sally, they have access to do certain things that maybe as other folks don't know, and unbeknownst to anybody that hasn't really delved in the code, maybe it's just a parameter that they just know the name of it, nobody else does. You know, not necessarily how I recommend doing it, but it is something you could do. All right, so let's comment those lines back out, and I promise you we are almost done. And let's run this. All right. So we passed in the name of chicken. We got our arguments. It tells us, this is what I was talking about with chalk. You do these info blocks, blue background, white text. It says execute command greeting default, which is the default thing. We have greetings chicken, and we got a success at the end. Okay, cool, great. So let's type help. Actually, let's do this. We typed in something and we have a missing requirement name. I think we can do version. Okay, if we type dash version, we get 0.1.0, which is the version that we told yards it was. We didn't have to wire up that option. It just knows that when we gave it a version, if somebody requests the version, it spits out the version we gave it. Simple enough. Let's do help. You'll see how nice this is. Oh my goodness, how nice is that? So it tells us Yaqui demo, CMD, ops. What are the commands we can do? Well, we have a default that is no command. And it notice that it has a space, it's all lined up beautifully. And it's the default command. Great. It just prints out a greeting, but it needs a name. We can do drawSkey. It draws some ASCII. Okay, cool. So what if I want to do a nested help? What if I want to do drawSkey and I want to get help on just the drawSkey? Oh, it does that. What does drawSkey do? It draws some ASCII. What are its options? Well, you can pass in version and help anytime, at any level. But animal. Notice that name isn't even mentioned here because name isn't on that command. Which animal should we draw? Well, it's required. Your choices are monkey and cat. Okay. Let's do. Oh, I passed name instead of animal. Oh, nice. We got another monkey. Compared courtesy of our ASCII provider of the day. Let's look at cat. Oh, we've got a sleeping cat. That sleeping cat reminds me it's about time to take a nap. So let's wrap this up. Let me get back to the slides here. All right, so we parsed the argv. Here are some links, and along with the video, what we'll do is we'll put a copy of the slideshow and stuff. So Yards.js, great tool. Designing a delightful CLI. It's a talk by the Heroku devs about the care that they put into their designing their command line interface, and it is just fantastic. The AWS CLI is written in Python. The entry parts of it's kind of in Bash, so you'll see something neat. They have the directive that I showed you like halfway down the main file. So it's like, do Bash and now do Python. And I didn't know until looking at that, you can even do that. That was like, in this industry, you learn something every day. Gulp CLI. So Gulp is written in Node.js, if anybody remembers like pre-Webpack days. Gulp is a fabulous command line interface. If you're writing one with Node, I would highly recommend looking at Gulp and look at how they did unit testing and all that stuff. The Webpack CLI, again, very good CLI. Cobra, so I do a lot of Golang development, so you've heard me mention Go a few times. If you like Go or if you're interested in Go, Cobra is like Yards, but for Golang, so pretty cool. And that is all I've got for you today, folks. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, great. Thank you all very much.
One question.
Oh, sure.
Golang, so you like it?
Yeah.
What advantages it or what exactly does it do?
So Golang is, I like to think of it as the middle ground between C++ and C#. C++, you're dealing with pointers and it's a bit of a difficult way of doing pointers that makes it very difficult. In C#, you don't deal with pointers, but there's times if you're doing complex things that you'll find yourself having to go into unsafe mode in C#. And I kind of cut my teeth on C#. I love C#. Golang is kind of a nice in between. So Golang is extremely fast because it's kind of close to the metal. It doesn't have a lot of abstractions. It doesn't have generics. It doesn't have lists. I mean, it just has slices, like arrays, and that's it. And so you can do a lot of neat things though, because they have their concurrency model is very neat. They have a notion called channels, which is basically like kind of a pub/sub type thing. It's like I can have a channel called messages, or just contrived example. And I can say this is a channel, it's a typed channel, so this channel only accepts payloads of a typed message. And you can have as many listeners to that channel as you want to have. It also has, as part of its concurrency model, it has a neat thing called Go functions, which basically, from anywhere in a Go, or Go routines they call it. If I'm executing a thing, and I say, oh yeah, because I did this, I need to do this other thing, but I don't want to wait for it, I can just say go func, and then wrap this thing, calling this thing in a function, and it'll basically do it on a new thread on its own. Okay, and then if you're like, well, I want to do that thing, but I want to know when it's done, well then you use channels. You have that thing write to a channel, and you have a listener for that channel, and so now you have multi-threaded concurrency that's pretty darn easy and slick. Like, and if you've done C#, the concurrency is nice now, but it didn't used to be that way. So if you were doing C# like pre.NET 4, I think it was, before they had like task.run and stuff like that, it was a little painful to do. It was easy to do multiple threads, that's easy, but it was difficult to do multiple threads with communication across threads, right? And Go has that kind of like handled out of the box. It's pretty slick in that regards. It's more painful in some other regards though, because things are very manual. It doesn't have the object-oriented paradigms of like C#. So you find yourself having to, which will really, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I find myself using a lot of interfaces because I'm like, okay, I just want objects that meet a certain interface, okay? And that's good in one regard because if I have another function over here, all it has to request is an interface. And if there's 10 different objects that fill that interface, because it does it by, if I have an interface called messenger and it has a method called send, any object, any struct is what they're called in Go, which is an object. Anything that has a method called send that has the same signature, if you're familiar with signature, it's like it has these types of arguments and gives this type of response. So send takes a message and it gives back a bool of whether or not it's sent. So that signature, anything that has that signature can fulfill that interface. So that any instance of any of those 10 objects could go into that function, and that function doesn't care because it just needs the interface. So there's some really neat paradigms, and it's made me grow a good bit at kind of architecturally, I feel like. And I don't know, it's just been enjoyable working with it. It's just one of those things that, I love JavaScript too, which is kind of the exact opposite. It's like everything's async and everything, well, I mean, it's all on the same thread, but it's a lot of async, right? And everything can do anything, and you can pass anything anywhere, and it doesn't care. It'll just, it'll do it like, you'll get funny things in logs like object, right? Or you'll just get like name is not a number or whatever. But it's just different, right? So I've enjoyed that.
I've just heard a lot about it. I just hadn't.
It's growing. I'm seeing as far as, so I don't do forecasting. I'm not a good person to do forecasting. But I will say this, okay, and I know that most time people preface things with like the thing they say they're not going to do. So I'm not going to do that, but what I will say is a pattern that I've seen. I saw the demand for jobs for Angular, like back, I was an early adopter of Angular, and it's kind of like where I built some reputation and built some skill set in web programming. I saw some rise in need for Angular, and so I started learning it really heavily and was able to do okay with that, and then same thing with React. I was actually not an early adopter of React, though. I tried to stay on the Angular train, it just didn't work out. Well, so anyways, so I'm seeing a lot more demand for Go. So in my consulting, I've got customers that are doing a lot more with Go, and they're wanting a lot more with Go, mainly because of the speed factor and the portability. So with Go, like I was saying, I've got some .NET customers that can only use Windows servers because it's the .NET runtime. It's not the new cool .NET Core, it's like .NET 4 or .NET 5, right? So they're having to pay the licensing fees, and they're having to have Windows-specific sysadmins and stuff like that. So they're doing a lot with Go, and so with Go, you can just tell the runtime. The runtime has a lot of the OS-specific stuff baked into it, and you can just pass it flags that say, hey, Go, build my project. I want it to run on Linux, and you can look up like all the different flags and stuff for it, but you can basically tell it what environment you're going to run it in, and it'll build an executable or whatever it needs to build specifically for that environment.
But you can't do multiple environments in the same.
Well, you just have to build multiple executables,
Well,
right?
yes,
One for
same
Linux, one
difference,
for
right,
yeah. And so,
Okay.
but like with a lot of you couldn't do that with ASP.NET. You couldn't do that with a lot of things. So it's pretty nice to be able to do that. And then just the speed. The benchmarks are really impressive in Go. It's a super, because it is so bare bones, like kind of to the metal. If you don't mind typing the extra stuff to like, it's a little frustrating sometimes because it's like, all I want to do is sort a list. Well, in order to sort a list, you have to, or sort a slice, you have to make a type of a named type of your slice, like by age. So maybe I have some products and I have shelf lives, okay? And I want to go sort those products by their age. So I have a specific slice called by age, and that slice implements that type implements an interface called less, which lets me know which one is less than the other. Swap, which basically says if the one at this index is less than the one at this index, swap them. And another one, I forget what. But it basically is the interface that allows you to call Go's baked-in sorting routines and say, hey, this thing implements all the sort interfaces, so I can tell it to sort, quick sort, bulk, whatever. I can tell it to sort this list of things because this specific named list implements that interface. So there's some repetitive things in the code, but it is extremely fast. So there's pros and cons.
Now, without using a third-party resource, if you did want to just create a CLI for all three major operating systems, would you have to just rebuild in 3 different ways?
No, so Node, okay, but what Node requires
Just on the client,
is
on who's
that
building it?
Node is installed on the wherever you're going to be running it from.
The server has to.
right?
No,
Well, it would be a
right.
server in this case. A command line is normally used by clients. They would install your command line locally and they would use that,
Right.
right? So if you are using Node to build it,
You could spit it out.
if you're a
for you.
Windows user or you're Mac, so if you're a Mac user, you have to have Node installed locally.
Yeah.
You Windows, you have to have Node installed locally. So I'm basically creating a mandate
Yes.
that yes, this is cross-platform and portable, but that's kind of, remember I had that asterisk by portability? Because I'm not creating a mandate with, well, yeah, you can run it, but if you run it with this thing.
Exactly.
Even Bash though is like that, because like, so the native thing in Windows is, any old timer Windows folks, remember what it's called? It's their command line, it was,
Is that
DOS,
batch? Oh,
DOS.
Sounds, yes.
DOS, and
Oh,
it's
yeah,
its own
Boro,
DOS isms, it
DOS.
has its own idioms, okay? Well, then they came out with PowerShell, which is actually really nice, but it's not Bash, it has its own idioms. There's Bash for Windows, so even if you wrote it in raw Bash, it would run on all the Nix systems, Unix, Linux,
Oh, okay.
Mac is
Yes.
Unix based, right? So all three of those systems it would run on, wouldn't on Mac. You'd still have to require a user have Bash for Windows to run the thing. Same with Python. So there's really not a way to just like magically have it always cross compatible. You're always gonna be making some kind of mandate.
Okay.
And if you're gonna have to make a mandate anyways, and because most developers use Node or use some kind of tools anyways, my thing is like, well, shoot, they probably already got Node or Python or whatever. Now, if you do Go, it's just a binary, and they just execute it however they would. So there is a benefit there, I guess, but
But there's no like React Native that will just run everywhere.
no.
I mean, like